The Vatican is a tiny state, shrouded in mysteries rooted in the depths of centuries. Behind the official routes of pilgrims and tourists lies a different Vatican, with sealed doors, forgotten corridors, and monasteries where no outsider's foot has trod for centuries. In 11th century chronicles, vague mentions first appear of places whose visitation became fatal even for God's vicars on earth. Among ancient parchments flash records of monasteries of sorrow and abodes of renunciation, where, according to legend, holiness itself gives way to something else. The territory of the Holy See is divided into visible and invisible parts. Official maps show only what is permitted for the world to see. Behind the facade of majestic basilicas and well-kept gardens lie restricted areas whose existence is denied or explained by the simple necessity of preserving the peace of monastic life. But why are some of these places surrounded not just by prohibitions, but by a genuine aura of fear? Does the curse of the popes, whispered even by cardinals, truly exist? Or is it merely a skillfully crafted legend serving some higher purposes of the Church? Behind the official maps of the Vatican lies an entire network of forgotten monasteries and hermitages, about which tour guides do not speak and guidebooks do not write. These places form a peculiar shadow of the Holy See, an invisible cartography of the forbidden, existing parallel to the brilliant facade of the papal capital. Many of these structures arose long before the formation of the modern Vatican, in the era of early Christianity or in the turbulent times of the early Middle Ages. Their location is subject to a special logic that eludes a superficial glance. If one connects the dots of these monasteries on a map, one can notice that they form an almost regular pentagon, framing the heart of the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica. Coincidence or ancient design? Historians still debate this. The monastery of St. Cyprian, located in the northeastern part of the Vatican, is a complex of 3 interconnected buildings constructed in the Romanesque style. Its peculiarity is the complete absence of windows on the outer walls and an unusual system of inner courtyards, creating a labyrinthine effect. Archival documents indicate that in the 16th century, this monastery was a place of special prayer practices associated with the penance of the highest church hierarchs. In the southwestern corner of the Vatican Gardens, hidden behind artfully planted cypresses, is the Hermitage of Dark Candles, a small stone structure combining elements of Byzantine and Romanesque architecture. According to records, this hermitage was used for special purification rituals after the election of a new pontiff. It is noteworthy that during the period from 1327 to 1372, when the papal see was in Avignon, the hermitage was completely abandoned and sealed. The eastern part of the Vatican conceals perhaps the most mysterious of the cursed monasteries, the Priory of 7 Keys. Its architecture sharply contrasts with the traditional style of Catholic buildings: sharp angles, asymmetrical towers, and strange bas-reliefs depicting creatures resembling neither angels nor demons. The geographical location of these and other closed monastic complexes forms a peculiar network entwining the entire Vatican. Researchers of sacred geography note that these structures were often erected on the sites of ancient pagan sanctuaries or at points of geological anomalies. Of particular interest is the fact that many of these monasteries are connected by underground passages, some of which were discovered only in the 20th century during restoration work. Some of these tunnels descend to a depth of 30 meters, crossing older Roman structures and catacombs. There is a theory that this underground network is the true source of the curse of the popes. Perhaps poisonous gases accumulate in these tunnels, or other factors are present that negatively affect the health of visitors. However, such a rational explanation does not account for the selectivity of the curse, which specifically afflicts pontiffs. In the northern part of the Vatican, hidden from curious eyes by dense vegetation and high walls, stands the hermitage of Saint Simeon, one of the most mysterious and unsettling places within the papal state. Founded in the 6th century during the pontificate of Pelagius I, this small monastic complex initially served as a place of seclusion for hermit monks seeking a particular strictness in their service. The architecture of the hermitage strikes with its asceticism and somber grandeur. Low vaults, narrow corridors, and a complete absence of decorative elements create an oppressive atmosphere, intensifying with each step deeper into the building. The central part of the complex is a small chapel with an altar made of black marble, on which strange symbols are carved, combining early Christian motifs with elements that defy unambiguous interpretation. The first mentions of Simeon's malady date back to the 7th century. Chronicles of that time preserve records of Pope Honorius I, who, after visiting the hermitage in 635, began to suffer from a strange ailment. And his mind became clouded, and he saw what was not, and spoke with those who had long departed this world. A few months later, the pontiff died under circumstances that chroniclers describe as unnatural and contrary to human nature. An even more disturbing incident occurred with Pope Constantine in 708. According to the records of the pontiff's personal secretary, after praying in the hermitage of Saint Simeon, Constantine fell into a melancholy so deep that he did not recognize his closest associates, and spoke of shadows pursuing him day and night. The Pope lived less than a year after this, and the last months of his life were marred by strange behavior that contemporaries described as an obsession with anguish and fear. A document preserved in the Vatican archives, dated to the 9th century, contains a direct warning to the highest church hierarchs. Let no one invested with supreme authority enter the walls of Simeon's abode without special need, for this place is marked with the seal of sorrow, and the burden of ages weighs upon it. This document, signed by Pope Leo IV, effectively established an unspoken prohibition on pontiffs visiting the hermitage. Of particular interest are archival records concerning the so-called Simeon's malady. Medical treatises of that time describe it as a state in which a person loses the joy of life, sees non-existent images, and hears voices from the void. Modern medical historians suggest that it might have been a form of severe depression, accompanied by hallucinations. But the selectivity of this ailment, afflicting precisely those who occupied the papal throne, is striking. In 1085, Pope Victor III, despite the existing prohibition, visited the hermitage of Saint Simeon. According to chronicles, he intended to cleanse this place of the curse weighing upon it. Just 4 months after this visit, Victor III died under strange circumstances, and before his death, as sources report, he was tormented by visions so terrible that he could neither sleep nor pray. The Monastery of the Dark Olive is located in the southwestern part of the Vatican, hidden from prying eyes by dense thickets of ancient trees. It got its name from the unusual olive grove surrounding its walls. The trees here have dark, almost black bark and foliage of a deep emerald hue. The monastery was founded in the 11th century, during the pontificate of Gregory VII, and from the very beginning of its existence, it was surrounded by an atmosphere of mystery. The architecture of the monastery strikes with its gloomy beauty. Unlike most Catholic buildings of that time, decorative elements are almost entirely absent here. The walls are built of dark stone, quarried, according to legends, from a quarry where a pagan sanctuary once stood. The windows, narrow, resembling loopholes, let in minimal light. The monastery's inner courtyard is a perfect circle, in the center of which is a well of unusual depth. The first mention of the monastery's connection with misfortunes befalling popes dates back to 1124th year. Pope Honorius II, despite the warnings of his confessor, visited the monastery to conduct a special service. The chronicles preserve a record by his personal secretary. The Holy Father emerged from the walls of the abode of the dark olive changed, as if a shadow had fallen upon his face. That same night, he was struck by a fever, and in delirium, he spoke of figures in dark robes standing by his bed. An even more disturbing incident occurred with Pope Lucius II in 1144th year. After visiting the monastery to consecrate a new chapel, the pontiff began to suffer from strange visions. The court physician recorded his words, "I see them every night, silent monks in hoods, hiding their faces. They stand around my bed and point to something beyond this world." Less than a year later, Lucius II died under mysterious circumstances. A peculiarity of the Monastery of the Dark Olive is its unusual isolation from the rest of the Vatican. Even during the peak of papal power, this place remained a closed enclave with its own laws and traditions. The monks who inhabited its walls took a vow of special silence. They were forbidden to utter anything but prayers throughout their lives. In 1267th year, Pope Clement IV, known for his skeptical attitude towards superstitions, decided to put an end to rumors about the monastery's curse. He spent 3 days and 3 nights within its walls, engaging in prayers and studying ancient manuscripts from the monastery library. Upon returning to his residence, the pontiff ordered all records of his stay in the monastery to be sealed and forbade any mention of it in his presence. Less than a month later, he died of an illness whose symptoms physicians described as the draining of vital forces. The secrets of the Vatican Apostolic Library conceal far more than meets the eye. This treasure trove of knowledge, founded in the 15th century, contains over 1 million printed books and 80,000 manuscripts. However, only a small fraction of these documents is accessible to researchers, and the secret archives remain sealed off to most scholars. Interestingly, documents concerning cursed monasteries have been systematically censored for centuries. Strange gaps can be found in the library's catalogs. Manuscripts with numbers but no description of their content. Some are marked with the mysterious abbreviation, "0. Non legendum Romae, not to be read in Rome." One of the most intriguing documents, partially accessible to researchers, is, 1. Sense of Forbidden Places, compiled in the 14th century by order of Pope John XXII. It contains vague references to, 2 within the Vatican, where, 3. Notably, many pages of this book were torn out or blotted with ink in the Middle Ages. In 1890, historian Alessandro Malvezzi received rare permission to study some restricted documents concerning the internal structure of the Vatican. After 3 weeks of work, he unexpectedly halted his research and returned to Florence, where he soon died, leaving a cryptic note. 4. Official papal chronicles also contain indirect mentions of forbidden places. For instance, in the biography of Pope Benedict VIII, there is a strange phrase. Similar hints appear in the biographies of many pontiffs, especially those whose reigns were long and successful. Documents from the period of the Avignon papacy are of particular interest. During this time, when the papal see was located in France, many of the Vatican's forbidden monasteries remained unsupervised. Reports by Cardinal Bertrand de Pouget, sent to Rome to inspect papal possessions, mention strange sounds emanating from sealed monasteries at night, and the necessity of strengthening the seals on the doors of the Monastery of the Dark Olive. The systematic removal of materials related to cursed monasteries became particularly noticeable during the Counter-Reformation. Pope Paul IV ordered the creation of a special commission to review all archival documents. The result of this commission's work was the creation of a secret index, Catalogue of Secret Places, which is still held in a special vault, accessible only to a few high-ranking cardinals. Remarkably, in the 20th century, when many of the Vatican's secret archives became more accessible to researchers, documents about cursed monasteries remained under the strictest prohibition. In 1956, historian Paolo Venci discovered a 17th-century map of the Vatican in the public archives, with strange symbols marked on it at the locations of alleged cursed monasteries. The next day, the map was confiscated, and Venci himself lost his permission to work in the library. Over the centuries of the Vatican's existence, thousands of people have served within its walls, from humble gardeners to the highest church hierarchs. Their testimonies, collected together, create a mosaic of oddities and inexplicable phenomena associated with closed monastic complexes. These stories were passed down by word of mouth, sometimes recorded in personal diaries, rarely in official documents. One of the earliest testimonies belongs to Giovanni Bartoli, a gardener who worked in the Vatican in the 15th century. In his diary, he describes a strange incident. Maria Conti, a maid in the papal palace in the 17th century, left memoirs about strange rituals that were performed during the full moon. Of particular value are the testimonies of people who held high positions in the church hierarchy. Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, who served at the court of Pope Paul III, wrote in his memoirs, "In the 18th century, Dr. Antonio Valli, personal physician to Pope Clement XIV, left a medical diary in which he described the pontiff's strange illness after visiting one of the closed monasteries. The symptoms do not correspond to any known disease. Fever is replaced by icy cold. The patient sees images that are not there and speaks languages he does not know. When I asked His Holiness about visiting the monastery, he became so agitated that I had to give him a sedative." Engineer Paolo Bruschi, who participated in restoration work in the Vatican in 1873, described a strange find. "During the inspection of the foundation of the Hermitage of St. Simeon, we discovered an underground chamber, not marked on any plan. Its walls were covered with symbols resembling Etruscan writing, but with an admixture of signs not found in any known alphabet. The next day, an order came to stop work and wall up the entrance to the chamber." Analyzing the authenticity of these testimonies, historians note that many of them contain details that could not have been invented or learned from publicly available sources. For example, the description of the architectural features of closed monasteries often coincides in the stories of people who lived in different eras and had no opportunity to communicate with each other. Comparing these testimonies with official historical data reveals an interesting pattern. Periods when mentions of strange phenomena in closed monasteries became particularly frequent coincided with periods of crises and upheavals in the history of the Catholic Church. Perhaps this indicates a connection between the curse of the popes and the deep processes occurring within the institutional structure of the Vatican. The history of the Vatican holds many mysterious cases of sudden illnesses and deaths of pontiffs, which, according to legend, were linked to visits to cursed monasteries. Medical records preserved in the archives paint a disturbing picture of strange symptoms, inexplicable even from the perspective of modern science. One of the most detailed documented cases occurred with Pope Innocent VIII in the year 1491. After a secret visit to the hermitage of Saint Simeon, the pontiff began to suffer from an inexplicable ailment. The Pope's personal physician, Giovanni da Vigo, left a detailed description of the symptoms. His Holiness is afflicted by a sickness unlike any known malady. His skin is pale as parchment, and in his eyes, horror is frozen, as if he constantly sees something unbearable. He refuses food and drink, claiming everything is poisoned. At night, he cries out about figures in dark robes standing by his bed. 3 weeks later, Innocent VIII died, and during the preparation of the body for burial, it was discovered that his hair had turned completely gray, though it had been dark before the illness. From a medical point of view, such rapid graying of hair could have been caused by extreme stress or exposure to an unknown toxin. An even more mysterious case occurred with Pope Clement V in the year 1314. After visiting the monastery of the Dark Olive, he began to suffer from attacks that contemporaries described as temporary darkening of the mind. During these attacks, the pontiff spoke an unknown language and drew strange symbols, similar to those found in the underground chambers of the monastery. The court physician recorded, "When the attack recedes, His Holiness remembers nothing of his actions and words, but experiences extreme weakness, as if his vital forces are leaving him." Clement V died that same year, and his body, according to testimonies, dried up, like that of a man who had lain in the desert for many days, though the illness lasted only a month. From the perspective of modern medicine, such rapid desiccation of tissues could indicate a serious metabolic disorder or exposure to an unknown pathogen. In the 18th century, Pope Clement XIV, known for his rational thinking and skepticism, decided to test the legend of the curse by spending a night in prayer at the hermitage of Saint Simeon. His personal physician, Antonio Salicetti, left detailed records of the subsequent illness. The symptoms began with a slight tremor in the hands, which gradually spread to the entire body. Then a severe fever appeared, accompanied by hallucinations. His Holiness saw strange creatures emerging from the walls and heard voices speaking ancient languages. Most surprisingly, he began to utter phrases in Aramaic and Coptic, languages he had never studied. Clement XIV died 6 months after this incident, and an autopsy showed strange changes in brain tissue, which Salicetti described as dark spots, similar to burn marks, although there was no external impact. Modern medical experts who have studied these records suggest that it could have been a rare form of encephalitis or exposure to a neurotoxin. Of particular interest is the case of Pope Pius VII, who in 1823 secretly visited the monastery of the Dark Olive. After this visit, he began to suffer from progressive paralysis, starting in the limbs and gradually spreading to the entire body. His physician, Giuseppe Tomaselli, recorded, "The illness is not like ordinary paralysis caused by an apoplectic stroke. There is no loss of speech or clouding of consciousness. His Holiness retains clarity of mind, but his body seems to turn to stone. At the same time, he constantly speaks of cold penetrating his bones, although his skin feels hot to the touch." Pius VII died a year later, and before his death, according to testimonies, he uttered a mysterious phrase, "They had been waiting for me there for centuries." Analyzing these and other cases from the perspective of modern medicine, several common features can be identified. Firstly, the illnesses developed rapidly and did not correspond to classical pathological patterns. Secondly, neurological symptoms, hallucinations, changes in speech, tremor, paralysis, were almost always present. Thirdly, many victims of the curse reported a feeling of the presence of invisible entities and an overwhelming fear. There are several scientific hypotheses explaining the phenomenon of the curse of the popes. One of them is related to the possible presence of toxic fungi in the ancient walls of monasteries. Some types of mold can produce mycotoxins that cause hallucinations, tremors, and other neurological symptoms. It is known that in medieval buildings with poor ventilation, the concentration of such toxins can reach dangerous levels. Over the centuries of the Vatican's existence, many popes and clergymen who visited the so-called, quote, subsequently suffered from mysterious psychological disorders. These cases, meticulously documented in secret archives, paint a disturbing picture of the influence these places had on the human psyche. Let's examine one of the most striking examples: the story of Cardinal Bellarmine, who, in 1596, spent a night in prayer at the Hermitage of St. Simeon. According to his personal secretary's diaries, prior to this visit, Bellarmine was known as a man of an exceptionally rational mind, distinguished by clarity of thought and strength of character. However, after the night in the Hermitage, his behavior changed dramatically. He became withdrawn, prone to fits of inexplicable fear and dark premonitions. In his diary, the cardinal wrote, "What I saw in the silence of these walls cannot be expressed in the words of our world. Shadows that moved against the laws of light, whispers in languages dead for thousands of years. I fear that a part of my soul remained there, in that abyss of time." Psychologists who have studied similar cases note signs of severe post-traumatic stress disorder caused by extreme psychological shock. Particularly interesting is the case of Pope Urban VI, who in 1380 visited the monastery of the Dark Olive. After this visit, the pontiff began to show signs of paranoid disorder. He saw conspiracies everywhere, distrusted even his closest advisors, and ordered the execution of several cardinals on suspicion of treason. His behavior became increasingly eccentric. He demanded that all food be tasted several times, refused to sleep in the same room 2 nights in a row, and constantly spoke of dark figures watching him. Modern psychiatrists analyzing descriptions of his behavior suggest that Urban VI suffered from a severe form of schizophrenia or paranoid psychosis, possibly triggered by a strong psychological trauma. What could have caused such dramatic changes in the psyche of people who visited the cursed monasteries? One theory is related to the architectural features of these places. Research shows that certain proportions of rooms, combinations of light and shadow, and acoustic effects can have a profound impact on the human psyche. In the Hermitage of St. Simeon, for example, the central chapel is built in such a way that it creates a special resonance, amplifying low-frequency sounds that are on the verge of audibility. These infrasound vibrations can induce feelings of anxiety, hallucinations, and a sense of invisible presences. Another factor is sensory deprivation. Many of the cursed monasteries are characterized by an extremely ascetic environment, minimal lighting, and acoustic isolation. It is known that prolonged exposure to sensory deprivation can lead to hallucinations and altered states of consciousness, even in mentally stable individuals. The role of autosuggestion in shaping the curse of the popes should not be underestimated. A person entering a place surrounded by ominous legends is already psychologically predisposed to anxious experiences. This effect is especially strong when it comes to high-ranking church hierarchs who realize they are violating an ancient prohibition. Fear of possible consequences can trigger a self-fulfilling prophecy mechanism. Collective beliefs also play a significant role in shaping the curse of the popes. Over centuries, a specific subculture with its own taboos and superstitions has formed in the Vatican. When several generations of people believe in the existence of a curse, this belief becomes a self-sustaining system that influences the interpretation of any events. If a pope falls ill or dies after visiting a forbidden monastery, it is perceived as confirmation of the curse, even if the cause is completely natural from a medical point of view. Noteworthy is the case of Pope Leo XIII, who, in the late 19th century, being an enlightened and skeptical man, decided to conduct his own investigation into the phenomenon of cursed monasteries. He did not visit the monasteries themselves, but studied archival documents and spoke with people who had experience staying in these places. In his personal notes, discovered after his death, he wrote, "Even without crossing the threshold of these places, I feel their influence, as if the very thought of them poisons the mind. Perhaps the true curse is not in the walls, but in our collective unconscious, which preserves the memory of something that should remain forgotten." Modern researchers of the psychology of religion note that the phenomenon of cursed monasteries can be seen as a manifestation of an archetypal fear of the sacred, what the religious scholar Rudolf Otto called numinous dread. This deep experience of encountering something radically different, beyond ordinary experience, is capable of causing profound psychological transformations. In this context, the madness of popes and clergymen who visited cursed monasteries can be interpreted not as pathology, but as an extreme form of religious experience for which there are simply no adequate categories in modern psychiatric classification. Perhaps the true nature of the curse of the popes lies in this paradox. Places created to approach the divine sometimes become portals to those dimensions of the human psyche where it is better not to look. Behind the official facade of the Vatican, behind its brilliant architecture and solemn ceremonies, lies a secret network of fraternities and orders whose existence is acknowledged only in the most closed circles of the church hierarchy. These secret societies, which emerged in different historical eras, are perhaps the true guardians of the legend of cursed monasteries and ancient vows, which are not mentioned in official church documents. One of the most mysterious is the Order of Eternal Silence, founded, according to rare mentions in archives, in the 8th century. Its members took a vow of silence until death, communicating only through a special system of gestures, unlike any known sign language. Historians suggest that it was this order that was associated with the hermitage of Saint Simeon, where, according to tradition, monks kept some knowledge too much for the human mind. Another secret society, the Brotherhood of Seven Seals, emerged during the Great Schism. Its members, chosen from among the most educated cardinals, dedicated themselves to studying ancient texts found in the Vatican dungeons. Interestingly, many of the brothers, after several years of service, showed signs of psychological disorders, similar to those described in victims of the curse of the popes. In the archives of the Inquisition, there are mentions of an investigation into the activities of the mysterious Order of Dark Knowledge in the 14th century. Inquisitors suspected its members of heresy and occult practices, but the investigation was suddenly halted by direct order of Pope John XXII. In the records of Inquisitor Bernardo Gui, there is a cryptic phrase, "What we discovered within the walls of the Monastery of Dark Olive must remain hidden, for truth itself can become poison for unprepared minds." Of particular interest is the Society of Keepers of the Threshold, which emerged in the 17th century. According to rare documents, its members were responsible for maintaining the physical and metaphysical boundaries between the ordinary territories of the Vatican and the so-called cursed monasteries. They developed complex rituals and protocols regulating access to forbidden places, and possibly deliberately spread legends of the curse to deter the uninitiated. Considering these secret societies in a historical context, it can be assumed that the curse of the popes was not a supernatural phenomenon, but part of a carefully developed system for preserving certain knowledge or practices. Perhaps some places in the Vatican were intended for special rituals, or for storing artifacts that were considered too dangerous or sacred for widespread access. The hypothesis of a veiled part of ancient vows suggests that beyond the public vows of monasticism, poverty, chastity, and obedience, there were deeper and more secret obligations known only to a narrow circle of initiates. These secret vows could include the preservation of certain knowledge, the maintenance of ancient rituals, or the protection of sacred relics. This theory is supported by the fact that many of the supposed cursed monasteries were founded during early Christianity, when the Church actively assimilated elements of older spiritual traditions. Perhaps these places served as repositories of esoteric knowledge that was considered too dangerous or controversial for widespread dissemination, yet too valuable to be completely destroyed. The land beneath the pontiff's feet. The geological mysteries of the Vatican conceal possible answers to the enigma of the cursed monasteries. The location of these mysterious places on the map forms not a random pattern, but follows an ancient logic, possibly connected with the underground features of the territory. Geologists, who received rare permission to investigate soils near the hermitage of St. Simeon in 1987, discovered an anomalous content of rare earth elements and an unusual radiation background, exceeding the average indicators for Rome by 2 to 3 times. Professor Marco Benedetti, who led the research, noted in his confidential report, "The monastery of the Dark Olive is located above an ancient geological fault, formed during the era of the Apennine Peninsula's formation. According to studies by Italian geophysicists, this fault serves as a channel for the release of deep gases, among which sulfur compounds, methane, and, most importantly, carbon dioxide have been detected. In enclosed spaces with poor ventilation, characteristic of medieval architecture, carbon dioxide concentrations can reach levels causing cerebral hypoxia, which manifests as dizziness, confusion, panic attacks, and hallucinations. Of particular interest are soil studies around the cursed monasteries, conducted in the early 2000s. Analysis of samples revealed the presence of Claviceps purpurea spores, known as ergot, as well as several species of psychoactive mushrooms of the genus psilocybe. These organisms can produce powerful psychedelic substances, which, upon entering the body through food, water, or even air, can cause profound changes in consciousness. Medical historian Alessandra Conti suggested that many symptoms of the papal curse remarkably resemble ergotism, poisoning by ergot alkaloids. Hallucinations, a burning sensation in the limbs, convulsions, mental disorders. All these are classic manifestations of ergotism known since the Middle Ages as St. Anthony's fire. Perhaps the curse of the monasteries has a purely material nature, connected with the microclimate of these places. Hydrogeological studies of the Vatican territory revealed another interesting feature. Underground water flows, saturated with minerals and metals, pass beneath the cursed monasteries. As water seeps through rocks, it becomes enriched with compounds of mercury, lead, arsenic, and other toxic elements. Upon evaporation, these substances can enter the air of the premises, and if such water is used for drinking or cooking, directly into the human body. Chronic heavy metal poisoning manifests as neuropsychiatric disorders, hallucinations, tremors, and progressive physical deterioration. symptoms strikingly similar to descriptions of Simeon's ailment and other manifestations of the curse. It is noteworthy that the geographical location of the cursed monasteries coincides with the lines of ancient Etruscan settlements. The Etruscans, predecessors of the Romans on the Apennine Peninsula, were known for their ability to identify geopathogenic zones, places with negative energy, harmful to health. They carefully avoided building dwellings in such zones, but sometimes erected temples and sanctuaries there, believing that these places were portals to the spirit world. Perhaps early Christian monks, who founded the cursed monasteries, unconsciously followed this ancient tradition, building their abodes precisely where the boundary between worlds seemed most tenuous. The seasonality of the curse's manifestations also supports the theory of natural factors. Analysis of historical records shows that most cases of sudden illnesses and deaths after visiting the cursed monasteries occurred during periods of increased seismic activity or anomalous meteorological conditions. It is known that before earthquakes, gases, including radon, are released from cracks in the Earth's crust, and atmospheric pressure and electromagnetic fields undergo significant changes, which can affect human psyche and physiology. Modern research in the field of geobiology offers another explanation for the phenomenon of cursed monasteries: the theory of geopathogenic zones. These zones are characterized by geomagnetic field anomalies, increased radiation background, and special vibrational characteristics. Prolonged stay in such places can cause chronic fatigue, depression, weakened immunity, and other negative effects. It is noteworthy that many ancient cultures intuitively recognized these zones and avoided building dwellings there, but often used them for ritual purposes. The chronicle of papal visits to the cursed monasteries of the Vatican represents one of the most enigmatic pages in the history of the Holy See. For centuries, dozens of pontiffs, defying warnings and ancient prohibitions, crossed the threshold of these mysterious abodes, and many of them soon faced tragic consequences for their curiosity. The beginning of this grim chronology dates back to the 7th century, when Pope Innocent III, known for his skeptical attitude towards superstitions, decided to personally visit the hermitage of St. Simeon. According to the records of his personal secretary, the pontiff spent only 3 hours in the hermitage, but emerged a changed man with the stamp of terror on his face. 2 weeks later, Innocent fell ill with an inexplicable fever, and a month later, he died, muttering on his deathbed about dark figures standing at the head of the bed. In the 9th century, Pope Gregory IV, having heard of the curse but not believing in it, visited the monastery of the Dark Olive. Chroniclers of that time note that immediately after the visit, the pontiff began to suffer from insomnia and strange visions. In his diary, discovered after his death, Gregory wrote, "They come every night, silent monks in hoods that hide their faces. They stand around my bed and point to something beyond this world." Less than a year later, the pontiff died under mysterious circumstances. A particularly dramatic story is connected with Pope Sylvester III, who in 1045 decided to spend a night in prayer in the hermitage of St. Simeon to cleanse this place of the curse hanging over it. The next morning, the pontiff was found in a state of profound shock. He did not recognize those around him and constantly repeated phrases in an unknown language. 3 months later, Sylvester was deposed from the papal throne, and a year later he died in a monastic hospital, never returning to a normal state of mind. In the 13th century, Pope Honorius III, known for his interest in mystical teachings, secretly visited 3 cursed monasteries in 1 week. According to the records of his confessor, the pontiff was searching for an ancient manuscript containing knowledge inaccessible to ordinary mortals. After these visits, Honorius locked himself in his chambers for 2 weeks, refusing food and communication. When he finally emerged, according to eyewitnesses, he looked like a man who had lived another life. The pontiff lived for less than a year after this, and before his death, ordered all his personal records to be burned. Analyzing the chronology of papal visits, historians note an interesting pattern. Pontiffs who showed the greatest skepticism towards the legend of the curse most often became its victims. Thus, Pope Clement V, known for his rational thinking, in 1306 publicly ridiculed superstitions about cursed monasteries, and, as proof of his righteousness, spent an entire day in the hermitage of Saint Simeon. 2 weeks later, the pontiff began to suffer from a strange ailment. His skin acquired an earthy hue. He complained of constant cold and saw strange images on the walls of his chambers. Clement died 8 months later, and his body, according to eyewitnesses, looked like a mummy, although it had not undergone any treatment. In the 15th century, Pope Nicholas V, known as a patron of science and art, became interested in ancient manuscripts stored in the library of the Monastery of the Dark Olive. Despite the cardinal's warnings, he personally visited the monastery and spent several hours there studying rare texts. Upon returning to his residence, the pontiff ordered all records of this visit sealed and forbade any mention of it. A month later, Nicholas began to suffer from progressive paralysis, which started in his limbs and gradually spread throughout his body. Before his death, he dictated a mysterious message that read, "Of particular interest is the case of Pope Pius II, who in 1463, being seriously ill, ordered himself to be carried to the hermitage of Saint Simeon, believing that the pontiff spent 3 days in the hermitage, after which, to everyone's surprise, his condition significantly improved." However, the joy was short-lived. 2 weeks later, Pius II died, and before his death, according to witnesses, uttered a mysterious phrase, "I have seen what lies beyond life, and now I am called there." In the 17th century, Pope Urban VIII, known for his interest in science and astronomy, decided to conduct a peculiar experiment. He sent 3 cardinals to the hermitage of Saint Simeon at 1-month intervals to see how the curse would manifest itself. The results were shocking. All 3 soon fell ill with a similar ailment, characterized by severe headaches, hallucinations, and progressive weakness. 2 cardinals died within a year. The third lived longer, but, according to contemporaries, lost clarity of mind and fell into a childlike state. Urban VIII himself, after this experiment, forbade any visits to the cursed monasteries and ordered some entrances to be walled up. In the 18th century, during the Enlightenment, the attitude towards the legend of the curse became more skeptical. Pope Benedict XIV, known for his progressive views, decided to personally study the phenomenon of the cursed monasteries. He visited the Monastery of the Dark Olive, accompanied by his personal physician and several scientists. Interestingly, none of his companions suffered any ill effects, but the pontiff himself, soon after the visit, began to complain of strange dreams and a feeling of an alien presence. In his diary, Benedict wrote, "Science cannot explain what I felt within the walls of this place. There is something there that goes beyond our understanding, not supernatural but also not explainable in conventional terms." The pontiff lived several more years after this visit, but, according to contemporaries, he was never the same, as if a part of him remained in those ancient walls. A statistical analysis of all known cases of papal visits to the cursed monasteries shows an alarming pattern. Of the 38 documented visits, in 29 cases, the pontiff died within a year of the visit. In 7 cases, severe mental disorders were observed, which did not lead to quick death but significantly affected the Pope's subsequent life and activities. And in only 2 cases were no negative consequences recorded. Such statistics go far beyond random coincidences and force one to consider the reality of the papal curse. Modern Vatican, a state mystery in the heart of Rome, attracting millions of tourists from all over the world. Daily, thousands of pilgrims and travelers pass through its museums, admire the Sistine Chapel and the majestic St. Peter's Basilica. However, even today, in an age of information openness, some parts of the papal state remain inaccessible to outsiders. Do those very cursed monasteries exist in the 21st century? And how does the official Vatican relate to legends about them? The policy of access to various parts of the Vatican territory is strictly regulated. Officially, the state is divided into several zones with different levels of access. Tourists have access to museums, the Sistine Chapel, St. Peter's Basilica, and parts of the gardens. Researchers and scholars can obtain special permits to work in the Apostolic Library and some archives. However, about 30% of the Vatican's territory remains closed to outsiders. These are administrative buildings, cardinal residences, and, what is particularly interesting, several ancient monastic complexes. The Skeet of St. Simeon, one of the supposedly cursed monasteries, is officially listed as a, quote, on modern maps of the Vatican, it is marked, but no tourist information about it is provided. Satellite images show a small stone building surrounded by high walls and dense vegetation. It is noteworthy that in the 2000s, extensive work was carried out around the Skeet to strengthen its walls and install modern security systems. The Monastery of the Dark Olive is mentioned in official Vatican documents as an, quote, to it is restricted even for most church ministers. According to unofficial sources, ancient manuscripts not included in the general catalogues of the Apostolic Library are stored in the monastery's dungeons. In 2000, Italian journalist Marco Toscani attempted to conduct an investigation concerning this monastery, but encountered a categorical refusal to provide any information. The official position of the Vatican regarding the existence of cursed monasteries and forbidden zones has remained unchanged for decades. The Holy See Press Office categorically denies the existence of any curses and explains the limited access to certain sites solely by security considerations, the need to preserve historical monuments, and respect for the secluded lifestyle of monastic communities. However, in 2015, an interesting incident occurred. During one of the general audiences, a journalist from the Spanish newspaper El País asked Pope Francis a direct question about the existence of cursed monasteries. The pontiff, known for his directness, paused for a few seconds, then replied, "In the Church, there are many places filled with history, sometimes bright, sometimes dark. Some places are best left alone, not because of superstition, but out of respect for the past and the decisions made by our predecessors." This diplomatic but ambiguous answer sparked a new wave of interest in the topic of closed Vatican territories. Shortly thereafter, the Apostolic Library announced the declassification of some archives related to the internal structure of the Vatican in the Middle Ages. However, documents directly related to the alleged cursed monasteries were not included in this list. In the modern structure of the Vatican, a department officially called the Congregation for the Preservation of Historical and Spiritual Heritage is of particular interest. Established in 1967, this body is responsible for the maintenance and protection of historical sites within the Papal State. According to some reports, it is this congregation that controls access to the alleged cursed monasteries and stores documentation related to them. Beyond the outward facade of religious power and spiritual authority, the cursed monasteries of the Vatican represent not only a mystical enigma, but also a powerful socio-cultural phenomenon. Viewing them through the lens of the sociology of religion, it becomes evident that the legends of the curse could have played an important regulatory function within the complex hierarchical structure of the Catholic Church. Fear of the unknown has always been an effective tool of control. The creation and maintenance of a myth about cursed places, the visitation of which threatens misfortune even to God's vicars on earth, forms a powerful psychological barrier, curbing the curiosity and ambitions of even the most influential individuals. Cardinal Giovanni Merzario, a renowned 19th-century church historian, wrote in his diaries, analyzing historical periods when legends of cursed monasteries became particularly widespread, a pattern emerges. They coincided with eras of internal crises and power struggles within the Church. For instance, during the Avignon papacy, the number of mentions of in-church chronicles increased many times over. Perhaps this was a way to curb the ambitions of anti-popes and contenders for the throne of St. Peter. The concept of timor sanctus holds a special place in religious psychology. This is not merely a primitive fear of punishment, but a complex existential experience associated with the awareness of the limits of human knowledge and power. The cursed monasteries of the Vatican could have served as a material embodiment of this concept, clearly demonstrating that there are boundaries beyond which even those vested with supreme spiritual authority should not tread. Historian of religion Mircea Eliade noted that every religious tradition has, quote, places or practices to which access is strictly limited. These prohibitions serve not only to protect the uninitiated from dangerous contact with the sacred, but also to preserve the inner mystery that constitutes the core of religious experience. In this context, cursed monasteries can be seen as a necessary element of the Vatican's sacred geography, maintaining a balance between revelation and mystery. Of particular interest is the use of curse legends as a tool of political governance within the ecclesiastical hierarchy. Studies show that access to forbidden monasteries often became a bargaining chip in the complex game of church politics. Cardinals and high-ranking hierarchs could use real or imaginary knowledge about the secrets of cursed abodes to strengthen their position or discredit opponents. In 1747, Cardinal Alberoni, an influential politician of his time, wrote in a secret dispatch, "The threat of sending a disobedient prelate on an inspection to the hermitage of St. Simeon is more effective than any official sanctions. No one wants to tempt fate, even if they consider the legend of the curse to be a fabrication." The phenomenon of cursed monasteries can also be examined through the prism of the theory of social construction of reality. According to this theory, society creates and maintains certain perceptions of reality through a system of social institutions and practices. Legends of the curse, passed down from generation to generation, become part of the institutional memory of the Church, forming a special layer of unwritten rules and prohibitions. It is noteworthy that even in the modern era, when rational thought, it would seem, should supplant superstitions, legends of cursed monasteries continue to influence the internal life of the Vatican. This testifies to the deep-seated nature of this phenomenon in the institutional culture of the Catholic Church, and its significance for maintaining the existing order. In the context of managing a religious organization, cursed monasteries can be seen as an element of a system of checks and balances. They serve as a reminder that even papal authority has its limits, that there are forces and mysteries before which ecclesiastical hierarchs are powerless. Such a reminder is especially important in an organization where power is concentrated in the hands of one person, declared infallible in matters of faith. Sociologist of religion Peter Berger noted that any religious system needs sacred mysteries, elements that remain unknown and unknowable. These mysteries maintain a sense of the transcendent, without which religion risks becoming a mere set of ethical rules or social rituals. Cursed monasteries, with their aura of the forbidden and incomprehensible, can fulfill precisely this function within the complex symbolic system of the Catholic Church. The phenomenon of the Vatican's cursed monasteries is not unique in the history of world religions. Practically every spiritual tradition has places surrounded by an aura of prohibition and mystical fear. A comparative analysis of these phenomena reveals surprising parallels and identifies universal patterns of human perception of the sacred. In the Buddhist tradition of Tibet, there are monasteries known as Gompa Tonwa, abodes of dark contemplation. These places, usually located in hard-to-reach mountainous areas, were traditionally used for chud practices, meditations in cemeteries and cremation grounds, aimed at overcoming the fear of death and attachment to the ego. It is noteworthy that monks who practiced in such monasteries for extended periods often displayed symptoms strikingly similar to the manifestations of Simeon's affliction, hallucinations, personality changes, and a loss of connection with ordinary reality. In the Hindu tradition, the temples of the Aghori, followers of Shiva who practice rituals in cremation grounds, are of particular interest. Some of these temples are considered forbidden for ordinary believers, and even high-ranking Brahmins avoid visiting them. According to legends, King Vikramaditya, after visiting one such temple in the 6th century, began to see ghosts and soon died under mysterious circumstances. A story strikingly resonant with the legends of papal curses. In Japanese Shintoism, there is the concept of kegare, ritual impurity associated with death. Some ancient shrines, especially those located near mass burial sites or associated with tragic historical events, are considered dangerous for the emperor and high-ranking priests to visit. Violation of this taboo, according to Japanese chronicles, repeatedly led to illnesses and misfortunes in the imperial family. Even in Islam, a religion that traditionally denies superstitions, there are mosques and mausoleums surrounded by an aura of mystical fear. In the Moroccan city of Fes, there is the Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque, in whose dungeons, according to local legends, ancient manuscripts are kept, the reading of which leads to madness. It is noteworthy that several sultans who showed interest in these texts soon after studying them faced severe illnesses or political catastrophes. In the Orthodox tradition, there are known cases of cursed monasteries on Mount Athos. Some skeets, especially those located in hard-to-reach areas, are surrounded by legends of strange phenomena and inexplicable illnesses afflicting visitors. The historian Nikephoros Gregoras in the 14th century described a skete, a visit to which by the Byzantine Emperor Andronikos II led to a darkening of the mind and strange visions that haunted him until his death. Analyzing these parallels, several universal patterns related to the concept of forbidden sanctuaries can be identified. Firstly, such places are often associated with the boundary between worlds. These are monasteries on mountaintops, in caves, near cemeteries, or ancient burial sites. Secondly, the prohibition on visiting them usually applies specifically to high-ranking individuals, rulers and senior clergy, which may indicate a deep connection of this phenomenon with the mechanisms of power regulation in religious hierarchies. Cultural analysis shows that the concept of sacred prohibition performs an important function in any religious system. It creates the necessary distance between the mundane and the sacred, forming a sense of the transcendent. Forbidden places become peculiar black holes in sacred geography, points where the usual laws of the spiritual world cease to operate. It is noteworthy that in many traditions, forbidden sanctuaries are associated with special forms of knowledge, ancient texts, forgotten rituals, or esoteric practices. This suggests that behind the legends of curses may lie a mechanism for protecting certain knowledge that was considered too dangerous or revolutionary for widespread dissemination. Returning to the cursed monasteries of the Vatican, one can see that they fit into the universal pattern of forbidden sanctuaries that exists in all world religions. Their uniqueness lies not in the mere fact of their existence, but in how meticulously cases of the curse were documented and how long this tradition was preserved in the heart of the Christian world. Perhaps the true nature of the papal curse is not related to supernatural forces, but to deep psychological and social mechanisms that manifest in any religious tradition when humans encounter extreme forms of sacred experience. In this sense, the cursed monasteries of the Vatican are just one manifestation of the universal human fear of the unknown and the incomprehensible, a fear that paradoxically coexists with an irresistible urge to explore the forbidden. The curse of the popes is one of the most enigmatic and controversial legends of the Vatican, balancing on the thin line between historical fact and mystical fiction. Analyzing all available evidence and hypotheses, we are faced with a difficult choice: to accept the existence of a supernatural phenomenon or to find a rational explanation for a series of tragic coincidences that have hounded pontiffs throughout the centuries. The historical reliability of the curse of the popes remains a subject of intense debate among researchers. On the one hand, numerous archival documents confirm the existence of closed monasteries within the Vatican territory, and strange cases of pontiffs falling ill after visiting them. Medical records, preserved from the Middle Ages to the present day, describe symptoms that are difficult to classify within known pathologies. Eyewitness accounts, from simple gardeners to cardinals, form a disturbing mosaic of inexplicable occurrences. On the other hand, many facts may have a perfectly rational explanation. Geological features of the Vatican territory, the presence of toxic fungi in ancient walls, the accumulation of radon in poorly ventilated rooms. All this could have caused symptoms perceived as manifestations of the curse. The psychological factor also played a significant role. A person entering a place surrounded by ominous legends is psychologically predisposed to anxious experiences. For understanding the institutional history of the Catholic Church, the phenomenon of cursed monasteries holds particular significance. It demonstrates the complex dialectic between the rational and the irrational in the management of a religious organization. Legends of the curse could have served as an effective tool for maintaining a certain order and discipline within the ecclesiastical hierarchy, reminding even the most powerful pontiffs of the limits of their authority. Particular attention should be paid to how the attitude towards the curse of the popes has changed throughout history. In the Middle Ages, it was perceived literally as a manifestation of supernatural forces. During the Enlightenment, attempts at rational explanation predominated. The modern Vatican maintains a diplomatic stance, neither confirming nor denying the existence of the curse, but upholding the prohibition on visiting certain places. The symbolic significance of the legend of the curse of the popes in the context of the modern perception of the Vatican is difficult to overestimate. In an era of information openness and technological progress, the existence of closed, forbidden zones in the heart of the Catholic Church maintains the aura of mystery surrounding this ancient institution. For millions of believers, the Vatican is not just an administrative center of the Church, but a place where the earthly and the divine meet. The legends of cursed monasteries emphasize this duality, reminding us that even in the center of the Christian world, there are places where human understanding reaches its limits. Comparing the curse of the popes with similar phenomena in other religious traditions reveals universal patterns of human perception of the sacred. In almost every spiritual tradition, there are forbidden places, the visiting of which is considered dangerous even for the highest hierarchs. This allows us to view the Vatican phenomenon not as a unique occurrence, but as part of the universal human experience of encountering the ultimate forms of the sacred. Perhaps the true meaning of the curse of the popes lies not in its literal reality or fictionality, but in the function it performs within the complex symbolic system of the Catholic Church. These forbidden places create the necessary distance between the mundane and the sacred, forming a sense of the transcendent. They remind us that even at the very heart of religious authority, there are mysteries inaccessible to human understanding. Ultimately, regardless of whether the curse of the popes exists as an objective phenomenon or is merely a product of collective imagination, its influence on the history and culture of the Vatican is undeniable. This legend has become an integral part of the invisible heritage that has shaped the identity of the Catholic Church for centuries. The enigma of the Vatican's cursed monasteries remains open. Perhaps it is precisely in this unresolved state that its true value lies, as a reminder that even in an age of scientific progress and informational openness, the world retains its secrets, and human knowledge has its limits. And perhaps some doors are indeed better left closed, not out of fear of the supernatural, but out of respect for that profound sense of the sacred that underlies any religious experience.